Folks, do you like movies? Do you spend your days thinking about how much you love to watch them? The good ones, even the bad ones everyone told you not to like? If so, it sounds like Super Yaki is the place for you. The team at Super Yaki loves movies, so much so that they've dedicated every waking moment of their life to bringing you top quality merchandise to showcase your love for them. From super soft t-shirts advocating for the immediate production of a third national treasure, to comfy sweatshirts that serve as a call to arms for all those in support of making Judy Greer America's lead. They even have pins of some of your favorite directors, like Sofia Coppola and Jordan Peele. Super Yaki joyously brings you tangible love letters to movies and filmmakers that you can wear with pride. Plus, the team at Super Yaki screen prints all their apparel using eco-friendly 100% water-based inks and ships with combustible poly mailers for an environmentally friendly alternative to online shopping. Pretty nice. If the spirit moves you, find them at superyaki.com. Let's watch more movies. And now, listeners to this podcast can take 10% off their next order with the code SUPERFRIEND at checkout. Hello, and welcome to another bonus episode of 21st Century Spielberg. I'm Chris Evangelista, a staff writer and film critic with SlashFilm.com. And when it comes to 21st Century Spielberg, the main episodes may be a one-man show, but for these bonus episodes, I like to bring in some guests. So with me today to talk about Warhorse and Lincoln is Alan Cerny. Alan, tell the folks at home all about yourself.
Hey, how's everybody doing? I'm Alan Cerny. I write for a website called vitalthrills.com, and I also have a podcast called Matinee Heroes, which I share with my friend Craig Price. And Chris was on a few weeks back when we were talking about E.T. the Extraterrestrial. So that was a lot of fun because I'm really happy to talk to a fellow Spielbergophile, if that's a word. I guess it is now.
Yes, it is.
So Spielberg is probably my favorite living filmmaker. And I was very eager to talk about it. And I have to say, I'm very jealous of this idea of a podcast because, damn it, I wish I'd have thought of it.
Oh, wow. Thank you. You just said, I want you to tell me a little bit about your personal relationship with Spielberg as a filmmaker. What do you feel? You obviously just said he's one of your favorites, but just talk a little bit more about how you feel about him as a filmmaker in general and his films and all that jazz.
I think that in comparison to the rest of the filmmakers I love out there, I think Spielberg is probably my most personal one because he's intersected with my life so many ways and so many times. All my movie memories, if they're not Star Wars as a child, all my movie memories, if they're not Star Wars, are most likely Spielberg. I mean, the first real movie memory I have is seeing Jaws when in 1975. I was 5 years old. I'm an old fart, but I saw it with my whole family, my cousins, my aunts, my uncles, my mom, my dad, my grandparents. We it was a convoy all into the theater because everybody's a big fisherman in my family, so they wanted to see the ultimate fishing story, and Jaws is the ultimate fishing story, and I just remember very vividly seeing that movie, asking my dad to let me know when the scary parts come because I was only 5 and he didn't because he hadn't seen it before either, so he had no idea. After that, I was hooked by sharks because I went to the library the next day and started checking books about sharks, and then I was checking out books on filmmaking, and I mean Spielberg really got me on that path really early on. It got his hooks into me really quickly. The film E.T. Is a film that's very, very dear to my heart. Probably my favorite Spielberg film. That's a lot of personal stuff wrapped around that movie. And when I saw it when I was 12 years old in 82, that was one of the all-time great movie summers. I saw it with friends. We got dropped off at the mall movie theater and just, I was just blown away by it. It was probably the first time I ever cried in a movie theater. And then a couple of weeks later, I went to see it with my dad because my mom was holding a party at the house and didn't want us dudes hanging around. So my dad took me, and he had not seen it before. And when E.T. passes away, I look over at my dad to see his reaction. I do that a lot, and people get annoyed going to the movies with me because I tend to, if I'd seen it before and they hadn't, they get bugged at me because I'm staring at them while they're watching the movie. Just so I want to see how they react to it, and that's probably really weird and creepy, but I don't know. Yeah, that's how I do it. So I turned over to look at my dad as ET dies, and I'm seeing him, and he's crying, and I'd never seen my dad cry before. It's kind of a big moment for me, and it ended up being the last film I saw with just my dad. I mean, we used to go to family movies all the time after that, but just me and my dad. The last movie we saw was E.T. because he passed away in 1987. So it's a very, very special film. And a lot of big reason for that is I wrote an article about it for back in the day when I was writing for Ain't It Cool. And it somehow passed across Spielberg's desk and he sent me a letter, which was really awesome. I got it framed, but I got it in the closet so it won't fade because I don't want the light to fade it out.
Yeah.
But it's, just all the films, especially in the 80s when another Spielberg movie dropped, it was, I had to be there. I had to be there. And, he's just a very big part of my life. He always probably will be.
No, yeah, that's I gotta say I do that same thing where I look at people when I watch movies, and there's nothing more annoying when they don't react at all. It's like, damn it, why don't you feel the same things I do? So that's not weird at all. I definitely know what you're talking about when you do.
It's a lot of fun. It's a lot of fun just watching, especially when you got an audience that's just when a movie's just connecting and you got an audience that's connecting with it. Watching audiences react to certain things is just that's part of the fun for me. I see movies. Well, before all of this happened, I still see movies in theaters multiple times, and a lot of it is just to kind of. Even though it's diluted for me, I get that same contact high when an audience loves something. So it's kind of a part of the process for me.
Yeah. So, what do you think about, obviously you talked about Spielberg's early films, and that seems to be what everyone talks about when they talk about Spielberg. And part of the reason I want to do this podcast is, although I do think the tide has turned in recent years, there was a long period where people were just shrugging off the 21st century work of Steven Spielberg. It was all about, I wish he would go back and make, movies like he used to. So what do you think about the 21st century filmography of Mr. Spielberg?
I think the treatment by a lot of critics and fans is incredibly unfair. I think he's doing amazing work. It's just not the work that you grow up with. He's a filmmaker who is growing in his experiences and in his belief system, and people change as they get older, and the more they get older, the more informed they become about certain things. Like a film like Munich, which were really harshly received by a lot of people, but I don't think they actually. I think they may have come around over time, but I don't think they actually watched the movie. Spielberg is attempting something very brave in that movie. He's hoping that both sides are at the table and he's listening to both of them. And, I think that's incredibly brave as a filmmaker to do. And I think Munich is incredible. Once we get to talk about Lincoln, I think I have Lincoln in my top 5 of all time Spielberg's. And I don't even blink about it. I think it's an amazing film. A lot of the, even the stuff that you would think is slight, I don't think gets the respect that it does. I think there are critics out there who love Tintin. I love Tintin, but that 8-minute or 9-minute take, is incredible, and he just tosses it away like it's effortless. It feels effortless because he puts so many little sight gags and so many little fun. What do they call it in a roller coaster? There's a term for it. I can't remember the term right now, but whenever a roller coaster has a little bump or a little fun moment, it's like that. It feels like that, and it's a remarkable piece of filmmaking, and it just feels like he does it on the fly. It's funny when you hear the story about how he made that scene where he says, "Well, I just kept going, and I didn't need to cut, and I just kept going." I kind of love that about it. So I do think that his 21st century work is incredible. I think there are some lesser stuff. I'm not over the couple of years or so since Ready Player One opened. I'm kind of a little down on that movie now, but I still think it's got great moments in it. And people go to they talk about your Scorsese's, and you talk about your other filmmakers from the 70s and 80s that are still working. And although I love Martin Scorsese, he's not breaking the mold in his career wise. Films like The Wolf of Wall Street are great, but it's another gangster movie. Irishman, although it's very elegiac and kind of not as fun as say a good movie like Goodfellas, but he's still kind of playing in those. He's still kind of playing in those modes. I mean, even Silence, which is a really great movie, is just another. It's a religious picture from a director who's done religious pictures. And I'm not down talking Scorsese; he's great, but I don't think he's quite broken away from the films that he used to make as much as Spielberg has. Because Spielberg would never have made a movie like Bridge of Spies in the '80s. He wouldn't. I don't think he would have ever made a movie like The Post, or a movie like Munich. Even he has grown as a filmmaker and explored a different reality than he originally, when he originally started. And I think that he's a hungry filmmaker, even more so now in a lot of ways.
Yeah, I think that's dead on. It's one of the things I love about the 21st century filmography is that he's stretching himself. He's early in his career, he would do this thing where, he would make, the blockbusters, and then every now and then he would turn out, the quote unquote prestige picture. He would have Empire of the Sun or The Color Purple. And those films were always met with sort of like this shrug where it was like, Spielberg's trying to be serious. We all know he's the blockbuster guy. And around the 21st century, he sort of enters this period where he realizes he can sort of just have it all. He can have his cake and eat it too. He can make movies that are simultaneously quote unquote popcorn entertainment, but they also have something to say. And that's what I always found so fascinating about these films. Not to get off our film topics, but Munich, that movie is something it was to say, but it's also a really cracking spy movie, and it's him showing like I can have it all. I can prove to you I'm an artist and I'm also an entertainer, and that's really sort of what he's always been chasing. There's that I love this story where Jaws is such a big movie, and he was so sure that he was going to get nominated for Oscars that he had a crew film him watching the nominations, and he didn't get nominated, and he was just heartbroken. And it's like, yeah, he's the most successful director of all time, but he's always sort of had this like imposter syndrome in a way and there's something refreshing about that the guy who's wildly successful still has that itch where he's like, I need to prove something. And, I love Martin Scorsese. He's my favorite filmmaker of all time, but I agree with you there that as much as I love Scorsese and as much as I feel like he's still turning out great movies, he's not really changing. And I love that Spielberg, he didn't have to do this. He didn't have to suddenly start making these different films. So the fact that he did is really what really impresses me so much about these movies.
Yeah, that video of him not getting the nomination for Jaws, it just tickles me that sitting right to his left is freaking Maniac Cop, and Joe Spinella and everything. And that video is really kind of painful to watch. But yeah, and I mean, maybe it's because he's a multi-billionaire, or at least $1 billionaire over. He can just do what he wants, and I guess it's a get out of jail free card anytime he wants to just flop that down. But he's still active in producing. He's still active in Amblin and television and all sorts of stuff. And I think that when you look at the spread of the arc of his career, and every movie is a personal snapshot of Spielberg's life at that time. It's just real, like I said the other day, when Arnold Spielberg, his father, passed away. That guy is incredibly influential in his career. I mean, and maybe more so than other filmmakers, because you see a movie like Close Encounters with a disaffected dad, or a movie like Hook, where he's kind of trying to build that relationship in the movie as well as in life. And then you get a movie like Saving Private Ryan, which is obviously an ode to his father, and that how it influenced all those films throughout the years, and it's just really interesting to watch and see how that works. I think other filmmakers kind of shy away from that personal aspect in their films, or they don't at least make it as obvious as all that. But Spielberg, you can chart his life in his films, and I think that's really interesting.
Yeah, the father issues are in pretty much everything. Even these two movies we're about to talk about have those father's issues, and that's like the arc of Spielberg's life, where for the longest time he blamed his father for the breakup of his parents' marriage, and he just held him responsible. And then over the years, he realized it's not his fault, and he reconciled with him, and he said he was so glad that he got to reconcile with his father, but even after they reconciled, that father theme, the distant father, the father that you just don't really understand, that's always there. And it's such a fascinating thing. But
Yeah.
but let's get into it. Let's start with War Horse, which is a movie that I've discovered over the years people just think is bad, which is baffling to me because you can say a lot of things about War Horse. You can say it's sappy, you can say it's sentimental, but to say it's bad is just shocking to me. And I love even the genesis behind this movie, where Spielberg was basically waiting for the animation on Tintin to render, and rather than just like take time off, which is what I would do because I'm a lazy bum, he was like, I need to make a new movie. And so he just quickly made War Horse while he was waiting for the animation on Tintin to get finished. And I think he shot this in like 42 or 62 days. It was a really short period of time. And I saw this movie a long time ago, or when it came out basically, and I loved it then. And so I had to revisit it again for the podcast, and I don't think I'd revisited it since that first time I watched it. And I remembered liking it, but watching it again this time, man, I was just so blown away by it. It's such a sweet, uncynical movie, and I feel like that's sort of why people don't care for it, because everyone is very cynical right now, and that's understandable. I'm cynical. I'm the most cynical person I know, but watching a movie like this where he's trying to get this rare humanity across, and in war of all things, where he's just trying to show humanity on all sides, not just the British side, but there's German soldiers who are very humane and so on. And it's such a sweet approach to this sort of story. And I'm always a little heartbroken when I see people being like, that's bargain basement Spielberg, because it's such a lovely movie, and it has such a sweeping, old-fashioned scale to it, which I just love.
Yeah, it's a movie that people say, well, I want Spielberg to get back to the Spielberg of the 80s. Well, there you go. It's right there. It's Wars, and it's a great movie. I love it. It's got and this is one of the films where he really. A lot of the other films, you can see the obvious film influences, but they're huge in this. I mean, you've got David Lean in one corner, you've got John Ford in another corner, you've got Howard Hawks over here, and he throws it all together because it is a very old-fashioned movie. I mean, it's like The Quiet Man or something, at parts, and other parts are All Quiet on the Western Front, and then you've got. I mean, it's a remarkable film, and it does have a really great heart to it. And I mean, I remember. I mean, I broke embargo this is one of my first reviews I ever wrote professionally, and the press screening was like 2 weeks away, but I mean, literally, I saw it a month before it opened, and because they were test screening it in Houston, and the people who rang the test screening know who I am, but I managed to get into theater without them seeing me because I knew I was breaking embargo. I said, screw it. I'm going to do it. So I got in the theater, and I kind of ducked my head down, knew that the movie was playing, and they didn't see me. And then I just signed in, and the movie started. I'm watching it. I'm bawling, and I'm having a great time. I'm loving the film because I do think it's a great film. And even revisiting it now, it just impresses on me how great it is, and how sterling that film is. And I come out, and the lady, the one of the reps is there, and she looks at me and says, "You're not supposed to be here." And I said, "Well, it's too late now. I watched it, and I'm not under an embargo. This was a free open screening. They didn't give me an NDA or anything like that. So I went home and wrote the review, and my editor at the time got a really angry phone call from Disney saying, "Hey, you broke embargo. You're not supposed to do this." And I go, "Well, this is one of my screeners. He actually didn't, he wasn't there to review it. He wasn't there. I mean, he basically threaded the needle a bit because I wasn't officially pressed yet. I hadn't even been a member of the Film Critics Society yet. So technically didn't break embargo because I was never really embargoed. right?
Right.
And so one of the reviews, so my review was one of the very first ones posted, and I went gaga. But it's real hard for me to review a Spielberg movie because I have obvious biases walking in. I don't know how else to put it. I try my best to put on that critical hat, but when it comes to a lot of his films, it's really hard for me to do that. And I think it's one of his. It's definitely. I don't. I wouldn't. I mean, it's hard to place in his roster for 21st century films because he has. I mean, frankly, I think there's only two of his films, or at least in the 21st century, that I don't really. I have high esteem for, but not as high as the others. It's really kind of hard to stick it in a list. And I mean, I love Warhorse. I think it's amazing. I don't know how he got the performances out of the animals that he got. I mean, because they can't all have been CGI, and the exception of CGI wasn't up to the level it is now. I mean, it wasn't. It's still less than 10 years ago, but still, I mean, that's shot with when one of the horses gets put down and all of them twitch. I mean,
Oh yeah.
I know. I mean, I know it's a manipulative moment, but when I am not against manipulation in movies. If a filmmaker and the top of their game in his craft or her craft is able to pull that emotion out of me, that's their job. That's what they're supposed to do. And if they're able to do it, maybe I can see the strings a little bit, but I'm still fine with it. And that movie is, very, very sentimental and doesn't have any problem at all showing it. And you're right. A lot of critics kind of said, "Well, it's just Spielberg," but and he's trying different things. And I mean, he's these are the same guys who 5 minutes before Warhouse came out were saying Spielberg needs to make those kind of movies again. Well, he did, and they kind of blew him off, which really kind of pisses me off, especially in this last reviewing. I just watched it this week for the podcast, and I'm just like, damn, this is good. Damn, this is good. Wow, that shot's amazing. And he shot in 2.35, which is always a good thing when Spielberg shoots like that.
Yeah.
It's just even the score, John Williams is great. And a lot of people are saying, well, John Williams isn't up to par like he used to be, but I disagree. I think Warhorse is one of the best scores. I mean, it's sweeping and epic, just like it's supposed to be. He made a Spielberg movie. He just made a Spielberg movie in a time where people said they wanted more, but they actually didn't. They would rather watch The Bourne Identity or something, and it is unabashedly optimistic. It has no qualms about being optimistic. I mean, even in a horrible time, in a horrible place, and yeah, I mean, it's still it wears its heart on its sleeve and is unapologetic about it. Watching it this time, I mean, there's so many shots, but that one that with the windmill.
It's so good.
It's like, damn. And Warhorse is a movie that you could release in 1945 and you wouldn't have to change a thing.
Yeah.
It may be, in fact, I mean, if it had been released in the 40s or 50s, it would have been a Best Picture winner. Easy. No doubt.
Yeah. I mean, and going back to the manipulation thing, like movies by default are manipulation. I mean, just the fact that a shot is edited is it's by definition manipulation. And I always get a little bothered by that when people are like, this movie's manipulating me. It's like, well, that's what a movie is supposed to do. It's bad when you're constantly aware of the manipulation, but you shouldn't criticize a film because it's manipulative. But I mean, this movie, it's like wall to wall amazing set pieces, which is really like impresses me the most. Beyond the emotion and the heart and all that stuff, but like it's a very episodic film. There's no real one narrative. It moves from one group of characters to the next, which is also very unique for Spielberg. It's not something he really does that often, but it also gives him the opportunity to stage like one amazing just set piece after another. That windmill thing you talked about is one where those two boys are executed, and he shies away a lot of times in this movie from showing us the graphic stuff, like that scene that you also talked about where the horse gets put down. We don't actually see it get shot, but we feel it from the way it's shot, from the way those horses' ears twitch. And then we don't really see those boys get shot because the windmill blocks it, but we feel that execution. It's nonetheless brutal. And one of my favorite moments in this movie is the Tom Hiddleston, Benedict Cumberbatch sequence where, they charge into the German camp and, the Germans get back to their machine guns they have strategically placed. And, the Germans are mowing down all these British soldiers, and rather than showing us the soldiers getting shot, Spielberg does this amazing thing where he cuts to behind the German lines, and he keeps cutting back and forth where you first you see the men on horses, then you cuts behind the line and you see the horses that the men were riding come leap over the machine guns riderless, and it's such a amazing way of showing us like, oh, these guys are literally being obliterated without showing us bullets tearing into their body. In a lot of ways it's more effective than any graphic violence can be.
Yeah, and I mean, he's not making Saving Private Ryan with this film. That was not his intention. You can tell right away that he wanted to make a movie that was very reminiscent of the movies that he went to see when he was a kid, and very reminiscent of the movies that kind of built his life. I mean, and as a filmmaker, and the idea of him not show. I mean, one of my favorite portions of that shot is it kind of keeps it. You see that shot of. I can't remember. I think it's Hiddleston's face when he knows they're screwed. And,
yes, yeah.
and you see the shot of the guy behind the machine gun, and you see his face as well. And it tells you everything. And it's a wonderful editing, storytelling moment that doesn't have to dip itself into that ultra violence because it's not necessary. And in fact, it's probably instead of watching in horror, you're kind of watching in sadness in a weird way. I think it's remarkably effective. My favorite sequence in the film, I think, is the cutting of the barbed wire. And the way that scene kind of plays out is remarkable. Like when they say you have bolt cutters and like 8 of them fly over the wall. And, just this touch of humanity that this horse brings these two people together for even the briefest moments. Because, 15 minutes later, they're going to be lobbing grenades or whatever over the wall again.
Right.
And it's just this really powerful moment. And I think that maybe people who had seen films like Saving Private Ryan or films like Amistad that didn't shy away from the violence at all were kind of surprised that this is a movie that does that. But I don't think they're understanding the wavelength that Spielberg is under when he's making this movie. He's not interested in showing that. That doesn't really make the point of what he's trying to say. We're all, and it maybe in its way, because we're all desensitized to violence. Spielberg's one of the guys who desensitized us, So instead he said, well, it'll matter more if you don't see it. And I think he's right.
Yeah, no, that's dead on. And yeah, like the whole movie in general is really just, whereas Saving Private Ryan is about, finding something good in all this horror and all that stuff, that one good thing, that Saving Private Ryan, if you will, wouldn't work if we didn't see all that horror. Whereas this movie, it illustrates that, yes, war is hell and there are the horrors of war, but this isn't really about that. This is more about trying to find, that sliver of humanity that exists in the worst conditions. And that barbed wire scene is a perfect example of that. I just love the banter between it's Toby Kebbell and I forget the other guy's actor's name, but just the banter between them. And even when it's over, where they're just like, I'll try to miss you when I shoot you later on. And I just love how honest that is and how earnest that is. And it goes on from there. And, the cynical part of me does kick in a little bit, where there's that part where they bring Joey the horse into the camp, and he wants the doctor, the human doctor, to work on the horse, and the human doctor is like, "Get the hell out of here! I'm not working on a horse." And eventually he relents, because there's that whole thing where it's like, this was my horse, sir, and they find the white markings and all that stuff, yeah. But there's a part of me that, as sweet and as wonderful as that scene is, there's a part of me in the back of my head where I'm immediately like, this is not how it would happen. They would immediately shoot that horse because everyone is terrible. And I feel like that's the only scene in the movie that doesn't quite work for me. And I don't think it's the movie's fault. It's because I just have a very low opinion of humanity.
Yeah. So And to his credit, man, Spielberg just steers right into that. I mean, it's like if I pull back on the sentimentality even a little bit, people will be going, no. And but he doesn't. He goes right full on into it. So because that's the way the movie is, and he wouldn't break the tone for that. So and it's it's just one of those movies that I probably need to revisit it more often. And like you, I hadn't seen it in a long time. It might have been since the theater. I think I watched it once at home when I bought the DVD Blu-ray, but after that, I kind of went on the shelf and never got back to it. So I'm glad to have rewatched it. I love this film.
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, now that we've talked Warhorse, let's go to a different movie that also is one of Spielberg's best, and up there, I'm right there with you with this movie, and that it's definitely, I don't know if it's my top 5, but it'd be my top 10, and that film is, of course, Lincoln. So let's tell me about Lincoln. Tell me what you think about Lincoln.
So, unlike Warhorse, Lincoln I've watched a lot. I've probably seen it about 20 times now. It's probably it's not really, I don't think people give Spielberg enough credit to recognize a good screenplay, because he does. But this is the one where you really, while watching it's great to watch, but I love listening to Lincoln. I love listening to the characters talk and how people just navigate themselves in a room. I love all the conversations and how rich it is, and it kind of stays in the cadence of the moment. There's absolutely no comparison at all to this other movie I'm comparing to, but it reminds me of how I feel about Miller's Crossing, which is a movie that I can watch, but if I was cleaning house, I'd be fine just listening to it as I'm cleaning house. I don't have to sit down and watch it because there's such a cadence and a rhythm to it, and I love that about it. I don't know if you agree with this or not. I think that there's a trilogy that Spielberg has created here, and it's basically a love letter to the American Constitution. And it's Lincoln, Bridge of Spies, and The Post. And when I think of one of these movies, I think of all three together now because I feel like Lincoln came out in 2012, where Obama was president, and the Republican Party was just fighting him tooth and nail on every moment. And one of the things that I feel like Spielberg was saying in Lincoln is twofold. First thing, he was saying that government is messy and crude, and it doesn't always make sense. But the only way we can get through it is if we get through it, and you have to go through the dirty, messy process to get to the place that we need to get. And I think it's directly commenting on the way Congress was during 2012 and with working or really not working with Obama and the way the government was being run at the time. The second thing, I think he made Lincoln just to remind Republicans that they were at one point they fought for nobility and something strong. I mean that maybe maybe offend some people, but I do think that Lincoln was definitely made with that in mind, because he had wanted to make Lincoln for a long time, but he didn't have really an entry point until the Doris Kearns Goodwin book came out, and at that point he said, well, if I want to focus on his life, I need to focus on a couple of months in it. I want to focus on that, because I think to tell the story of Lincoln himself is too big, too broad. I can't do it. If I focus on this, I can tell a successful story, because a lot of people know who Lincoln is, and they should anyway, But I think that the messy nature of trying to get this amendment passed, the back scenes dealings that had to happen for it to even get on the floor, and Lincoln subtly and not so subtly trying to move this piece of legislation forward. It's just a really interesting look at the process. I've read reviews, and at first I kind of agreed with them, where they said maybe the movie should have ended with him walking off to the carriage before they go to Ford's Theater.
Yeah,
but I kind of come up.
I also feel that way.
Okay. I think the show, the ending, kind of illustrates the cost of what Lincoln did, and that democracy doesn't spare everybody. I mean, it's not a magical process that ends when something passes. I mean, and there are consequences for all of it. And his consequences was that he paid for this legislation with his life. And although we all know Lincoln was assassinated, I don't think he was looking at us. I think he's looking at future generations to watch this film and maybe judge it by that nature alone. Because I think maybe future generations who wouldn't be maybe so savvy on filmmaking and savvy on Spielberg in particular, because a lot of people accuse him of not nailing the landing in some movies, and this might be one of them for a few people. But I think on a larger scale, if somebody watches this film 20 years from now, I think they would bitch if they didn't show his assassination. So I mean, it's a different kind of aspect on that. And of course, he gets one of the all-time. I mean, he gets Daniel Day-Lewis, which is basically getting throwing a fastball. Spielberg and Daniel Day-Lewis together in a movie is basically like throwing a fastball to Babe Ruth. That fucker's going out. Okay, and and it's rare when we say, "Wow, the acting was great in the Spielberg movie," and I mean, it often is. Okay, but it's not one of the things that people give him enough credit for, because I do think he's real skill with actors. But I mean, and one of the things that I was thinking about watching this film is that we're never going to get the Lincoln of reality in a movie. I just don't think we are, and I mean, I don't think America is ready to see a Lincoln who, yes, freed the slaves in the Emancipation Proclamation and pushed the 13th Amendment through. But Lincoln was also an incredible racist. I mean, he was. I mean, that's just the way people thought back then. And I don't think that, I mean, they sort of kind of hint at it in that moment where the former slave asks him what is going to be in store for us after this thing passes. And then Lincoln says, well, I don't know you. I don't know your people. And that's kind of it really shies away from the reality of it a little bit. Maybe Lincoln was being diplomatic at the moment, but yeah, he was racist. I mean, everybody was, so it's not a movie that can really dive into the actual reality of it. But what it does successfully do is portray the government as a work in progress, always going to be a work in progress. We're always going to have it for every step we take forward. Some days it will be 2 steps backward. Now it's a little more optimistic to look at than it is now. I don't know, I don't know how, I don't know how Lincoln would play now with people considering everything that's happened. But at the time, I mean, we were just 4 years into the Obama presidency, and a lot of us on the left were pretty happy with how things were going. Unlike other than certain things like drone strikes and things like that. I think that we felt that there was a time and a place, and that stuff was going to come eventually. We didn't expect what was going to happened. And when Lincoln came out, it's kind of a struggle for a lot of people to understand that Spielberg was making a process government movie. He was basically making The West Wing in a lot of ways. And but as I watch it, the more I watch it and appreciate Kushner's script, because that script is a fireball, and appreciate the acting and the performances, it's a movie that I just revisit a ton. I don't know what it is about that film that just so relaxes me. Maybe because in a time where government is absolutely not working, we know that it worked once and might work again. That might be a part of it.
So yeah, I mean, everything you just said is dead on. To piggyback off some of that stuff. So when this came out, I loved it. I've always been a big Lincoln buff. I've read a lot about Lincoln, especially just about his depression and his melancholy, as they called it. Because as someone with depression, it's always like amazing to me that this guy had depression too, and look at all the things he did, Chris. Maybe one day you'll do something. So I've read a lot of books. I've watched a lot of documentaries, and so when this came out, it was a big deal to me. It was like a Spielberg movie about Lincoln starring Daniel Day-Lewis. I was so excited, and obviously we can never really know what the real Lincoln was like, but based on everything I've read and all my quote unquote research. Watching Daniel Day-Lewis in his performance is literally like, watching the real Lincoln step out of time. When I was writing this up, I was saying it's not so much that he's playing Lincoln. It's more that like Lincoln's ghost is like possessing Daniel Day-Lewis. And, I don't want to go off on a rant on Daniel Day-Lewis as an actor. I think that everyone knows how into his roles he gets, but this is like top tier for me of Daniel Day-Lewis performances. But when this came out, I loved it, and not for any particular reason, but I remember I revisited it not too soon after the 2016 election, and it wasn't because I was like, I need a reminder. I just like watching this movie, so I put it on, and watching it after the election in 2016, it just made me miserable. And just to watch this movie where, yes, it's about, the government being sort of rough and tumble, and it's about these backroom deals, but it's also about politicians who who seem to actually care about stuff, which we don't have anymore. And
Yeah.
as bad as it was in 2016, revisiting it now here in the hell year that is 2020, it's just surreal to watch this movie that feels like it's from not just a alternate history, just an alternate planet where
Yeah.
it's anyone who has finished high school history knows that the Democratic Party and the Republican Party have switched positions over years. As much as Republicans love to tout that talking point of Republicans were the party that ended slavery, it's like, yes, but you're not like that anymore. So let's not go off on a rant like that. But it's just surreal to watch this movie where all of these Republican characters are just fighting so hard for something. And, you don't have that now, and you'll never have that again. And it's just such a bizarre thing to watch now more than ever. And, I do love that this movie does remind you that, politics can be used for good in the right hands.
Mm-hmm.
It's messy. It's not always easy. It's not always exactly what we want it to be. But if you get people in there who have some form of integrity, like an ounce of integrity, they're going to try and do the right thing. And it's maddening to watch this movie and then compare it to just where we are now. And a part of me, it just finds it almost like impossible to reconcile. And I don't know, not to get too bleak, but I have no idea what the future holds. And
Yeah.
to watch a movie like this and compare it with the politics of today, it's just jarring.
Yeah. I mean, you want in this film, I mean, and I'm definitely not sympathizing with the pro-slavery people in this movie, but the conversations that and the battles that these people were fighting were battles from genuine belief systems. I mean, and not. The horribleness of slavery aside, they were fighting because they passionately believed in what they were doing. I mean, the Democrats thought they were morally right. They weren't.
Right.
At all, but they thought they were, and the Republicans felt like they were morally correct, and they were, and obviously, but they were both fighting from a place of moral outrage or a moral strong belief in what they were doing. We don't have moral outrage anymore. I mean, we may on one side absolutely be morally outraged, but we can't get the other side to even feel a glimpse of any of that because it's so cynical. I mean, they spout the petition, they spout the words that they spout not because it's right or wrong, it's because they know it pisses the other side off. It pisses the left off to do what they're doing, and that's their motive. That's their entire end game. It's not to make actual legislation that they truly believe in. The only place that they probably do that is probably pro-life, anti-abortion stuff. But all the other stuff is just what's the phrase they use to trigger the libs,
Yeah.
and there's no actual movement behind anything other than that. I saw Lincoln for the first time. My day job, when I'm not writing reviews or doing podcast stuff, my day job is I work for a judge, and I work for a justice of the peace court judge. And I wanted to I hadn't seen it yet, but I wanted to take my boss to see it because sometimes I would let people come with me at work to early screenings of stuff. Like there's a lady at work who's a big Star Wars freak, and I took her to The Last Jedi, which we saw a few days before opening, and she was excited about that. And so I took my boss, the judge, to see Lincoln. And as a government employee, I can absolutely relate to a lot of this film, and that might be one of the bigger reasons why I'm so in love with it is because I know, I mean, even if it's just a judge, right? Even if you're, it's nothing on a scale of the presidency, but we still have major fights and we still have major issues that I wouldn't say fights, but we have major issues that we're dealing with. I mean, we do evictions at our court, so and I mean that's a tough thing to go through, to watch, and sometimes you get really sympathetic landlords who are really trying to help people out, and you get tenants who really need the assistance, and we go out of our way to help them. But sometimes the process is devastating. I mean, there's no way around it. And so trying to reconcile that is always a trial for me, working where I work. But one of the aspects of the things that we do, I mean, we do small claims, these little things that people, sometimes debt claims, lawsuits. of people trying to get justice that way, or just even simple traffic tickets or simple Class C misdemeanor stuff, right? And you would think that on that level, it's not as big as obviously deciding slavery. It's not, but in the microcosm of those discussions and the microcosm of how we proceed on a situation, it's very similar. It's very well. There's negotiation here and there's negotiation here. I mean, you don't like this person, you don't like this person, but there is a path forward to move forward. And even though you're just going to have to put your personal feelings or things aside for things, you have one goal in mind, and the other person has that same goal, is to resolve this particular conflict. And you have to see your way through it, and sometimes it's difficult. I'm a licensed mediator as well, so I kind of know it. So when they have these discussions in these rooms without trying to, get through the certain things, I really relate to that. Like the couple who wants the toll road and on their property, they say they own that toll road, and
Yeah.
and the conversation they have is, oh well, you're gonna vote for who do you prefer in the upcoming elections? Like, well, I mean, or who did you vote for in the last election? And they say, well, Lincoln, of course. And says, what do you think of the 13th Amendment? And says, well, we're for it. We want it to pass. And then he tells them, hey, if the war ended tomorrow, what do you think? No, we wouldn't pass it. And he, drops the word. And that's interesting moment for a couple of reasons. One, because I don't think it has the intended effect on Lincoln that Stewart thinks it's going to have.
Right.
Stewart thinks it's going to be like a moment where we should probably put this battle aside. We have more important things to accomplish. We should probably not fight this because I don't know how it's going to play over for the rest of the people in the country. But to Lincoln, that's a moment of kind of inspiration. It's like, well, I can get what I want, but I can get what I want in a different way. It's not going to be I'm not going to get on a huge podium and make a broad speech for the 19th Amendment. I'm going to appeal to people's more, what's the word, pragmatic nature on this.
Right.
And I can appeal, like, well, slavery is bad, but if I can get people to follow and support this amendment for other reasons, like say ending the war, or economic reasons, or all sorts of different things, I can get what I want, and they don't even realize that I'm still getting what I want, even when they think, well, I hate this, but it's kind of a complicated political maneuver that he's doing. I mean, he never really even the first time he comes out and he does that speech at the table and says, I can't hear this anymore. I want this to happen, okay? And I've been trying everything. I've been doing everything large and small in my power to make sure it happened. I didn't let the delegates come to town. I didn't, I had you basically bribe other people to vote my way. But now I'm righteously indignant. Now this is what I'm doing, and I'm gonna do whatever it takes to get there. I'm almost there, and this is the last push. And I mean, I really admire the movie for that. I think that because it gets into the messiness of politics, and people don't necessarily vote for their best interest. They vote for what they think that they can. They vote for what they think is their best interest, but it's not the best interest of everyone, right?
Right.
I mean, he manages to. I mean, that older couple is going to vote for him, or going to vote for the 19th Amendment, no matter what, because he's going to get them their toll road, right?
Yeah.
It's not because he's freeing slaves. He's going to get them what they want. So, and I think as I said, what I said about microcosms, little moments are the same as big moments, and I really admire that about this film. I really think that I kind of get frustrated with critics when I go over Lincoln, because I think that they just, it's another Spielberg. I'll give it its due attention. Like, no, screw you, man. This movie is a big deal. This movie is important.
Oh, yeah.
And it's Spielberg working at the top of his freaking game, especially with the performances he gets. And it's not just Daniel Day-Lewis. Sally Field is amazing in this movie. David Strathairn is amazing. I adore James Spader's Bilbo.
It's so good. I mean, this movie is like it's like wall to wall great character actors. I mean, James Spader. You have Adam Driver in a little role. You have Bill Camp. He's the one of those the toll booth couple.
Yeah.
It's wall to wall, just amazing character actors. Walton Goggins, John Hawkes, Tim Blake Nelson. And they're all, they all have something interesting to do here, even if their roles are very small. Like Michael Stuhlbarg has a very small role as that guy who's just nervous about voting.
I say I.
Exactly. Like they all have something to do, and that's a testament to those performances and a testament to that screenplay. And I also just love how friggin' funny this movie is. Like when I went into this, I was not expecting it to be as just funny as it was. And this is like one of Spielberg's funniest movies. And it's not like accidentally funny. It's very intentionally funny. It's just like even though it's dealing with these big historical things, it's almost like a breezy little script, just the way it just moves about, and everyone just has these one-liners that just go over so well. And
Tommy Lee Jones is like bringing it, and one of my favorite, the moment where Tommy Lee Jones and Lincoln are just kind of facing off, and you think it's like going to be this big conversation. But I love like this, and they have, like I was talking about the microcosm. It's all in that little speech too. It's like, well, you don't understand. It's like I know true north. I mean, I know what justice is, and it's like, well, I know true north too, but a compass doesn't tell you the direction. A compass just points in the direction you need to go, but there's all sorts of shit in the way that you have to navigate through. A compass doesn't get you there, and right. And then you're right about the humor. That's in between Tommy Lee Jones and Cough-Roth, or however he says it. That's comedic. It opens. He's wonderful. He's wonderful, and it is very, very funny. And it's a movie that pays off if you pay attention, because I mean, even stuff that kind of early in the film that kind of gets referenced later on. It's a movie that's really rich in its vocabulary, rich in its cadence, and like I said, it's a joy to listen to. I think of all the films, and of all the films that Spielberg has made, I really believe that Lincoln is the best script he's ever worked with. If there's anyone, the one that comes closest to great script, maybe to Lincoln, is interestingly enough Jaws, because Jaws was workshopped so hard. They managed to. That's one of those few films where they managed to work all the kinks out, or at least it seems that way, because that script is, I don't think it's given enough attention as it deserves, because it makes every scene pop and gives so many great character moments. And people talk about the spectacle of Jaws and the scariness and everything, but I think that script is one of his finest. But to me, Lincoln is his best script that he's ever worked with, hands down, kind of.
I agree, 100%. All right. So, Alan, thank you so much for being here. It was a pleasure to talk to you about these films, and I'm glad I'm glad you were able to lend the insight you did to these two specific films in general. I feel like you had a lot to bring to these two films here. So thank you so much for coming on here. Tell the folks again at home where they can find you, if you will.
So I am on the website known as Twitter as Alan W. Cerny. I write for vitalthrills.com, and as we were speaking, I posted my review of Bill and Ted Face the Music. And I have a podcast with my friend Craig Price called Matinee Heroes, where we talk about heroic cinema for the most part, and how we can use that heroism from the movies that we love to relate in our real lives. And it was great having you on for ET, and I would love to have you on for another one. At some point, maybe even talking Warhorse.
Absolutely, yeah.
So that would be great. But I really appreciate the time on this. I could talk about Spielberg all day, and I absolutely have it some days. So I love it. So, and your podcast is wonderful.
Thank you. I appreciate that. So thanks so much. New episodes of 21st Century Spielberg are published twice a month. You can also read more about the topics covered here at slashfilm.com. You can subscribe to 21st Century Spielberg on iTunes, Google Podcasts, Overcast, Spotify, and all the other popular podcast apps. Please go on to iTunes, give this podcast a 5-star rating, if you will. It really helps. I'm Chris Evangelista. You can find me on Twitter at CEvangelista413 or on this podcast's Twitter at Spielberg2K.